We could get a fourth one. I think, even though they can't do the 9 years thing anymore, I think they should just throw that out the window and give us a fourth one. Anytime they want, give it to me right now.
Yeah. Figure out a way to shoehorn it in.
You know, they are in their 50s now. Ethan Hawke, still prolific. She's prolific in France. You know, they could easily get back together, and they would be grandparents.
Ethan Hawke's in his 50s?
Let's see. He got famous in the early 90s with Dead Poets Society. They came out in 91?
Yeah, something like that.
And he was 20. So that was 30 years ago.
Dead Poets Society. My son, he watched it the second time. He just watched it for the first time 2 weeks ago. My oldest son is 15. He's got a long list of films that I'm chewing him through. So he finally got.
He's at the perfect age, man. I'm so jealous. I would love to go back to being 15. You know, it's so funny when you see. I'm only 26, but I've been a cinephile since I was young. I love seeing people who are freshmen, sophomores in college, and they're starting to get into these international films more. They're starting to go further back. All they really know, it's like a rule, I guess. When you're 18 or 19, your film knowledge is Tarantino. You're probably the biggest David Fincher fan I've ever met. Maybe Paul Thomas Anderson if you're a little bit more on the pretentious side. But relatively modern American filmmakers is kind of, that's how you fall in love with film if you're a young American person, right? When I first started falling in love with movies, I had the same experience. Pulp Fiction blew my mind. Then I started watching Fight Club, and I started watching all these other movies, David Fincher. I watched Punch Drunk Love, and There Will Be Blood, and that's how it starts. And then when you hit college, you Casablanca, things like that. So I still remember the day I watched Casablanca. I watched The Last Picture Show for the first time.
Oh, wow.
The Peter Bogdanovich movie. And then I watched Casablanca, and then I watched When Harry Met Sally. And that was the first time I had seen any of them.
Wow.
And I just went back to back to back. My wife went to bed. I was freshly married, so this was 3 years ago. I was a little late on some of these. Wow. But I was sitting up. It was only 9. She went to bed early. I put one on. I was like, well, that was great. I'll just watch another one that's on my list. And I still vividly remember just kind of, it was 3 a.m. by the time I finally finished and got to sleep. But I woke up the next morning I need to sit down and write, Movies that you can't put your finger on it, but right after you watch them or maybe the next day, you just feel this insatiable desire to start telling your own story.
Absolutely,
yeah. And sometimes they're not necessarily consequential movies. There's this movie called, oh God, I forget what it's called, but it's about an improv group. It's got Keegan-Michael Key in it. It's got Mike Birbiglia. I forget what it's called, but it's a Netflix original, and it's about this improv group that starts to blow up because Keegan-Michael Key's character gets picked up by the in-universe version of SNL, and he's starting to get famous. And Mike Birbiglia's character is the leader of the improv group, and he's kind of aging out of it. He's a little old, and he needs to kind of start taking his life seriously. It's got Chris Gethard in it, who's one of my all-time favorites. Chris Gethard is an improv guy. He's a New Yorker. He's done some stand-up. He has this really experimental stand-up special. Also don't know the name of it, but I've watched it at least 5 times.
Nice.
That's not stand-up at all. He just stands in front of an audience and explains some experiences of his, but they're all really serious, like a suicide attempt, going to therapy. He tells these really serious stories, how he found out he was an alcoholic, but he tells them in a way that's got such levity. It's not like a normal stand-up. It's just him telling.
Don't Think Twice.
Don't Think Twice is the movie.
The movie, yeah.
Yep, Don't Think Twice is the movie.
Oh, gosh.
And that movie, it's not like one of the greatest movies I've ever seen or anything.
Right.
It's not one of my favorites. But after I watched that movie, I stayed up all night and wrote my first feature screenplay. I mean, I didn't finish it that night, but I wrote the first 23 pages because something about that movie, I was just I need to go.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. Career Suicide, I think, is the...
Career Suicide?
Is that it? Chris Gethard's special. I want to say it's called Career Suicide. Chris Gethard, Career Suicide. Yes, that's what it's called. It's on HBO Max. It's got 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, all right.
It is...
Career
somehow hilarious, but like all he talks about is like his extreme battle with depression and all of these serious events that happened to him. But he has this way of telling them where like, you can laugh, even though he's telling you like, I was binge drinking and I was blacking out and I was talking to someone about it and they were like, sounds like you're an alcoholic. And he's like, I barely, I don't drink every day. And they're like, that's not what makes you an alcoholic. It's your relationship with alcohol. If every time you drink way too much and you black out, you're an alcoholic.
Once a year, that's what happens.
Yeah, for him it was more often than that. But he had this idea that I think a lot of people have that like if you're not drinking every day, if it's not a problem, you're not an alcoholic. But it's like, what is your relationship to alcohol? And he goes into this huge thing about that and how he had to come to terms with it. And it's so funny the way he says it, even though he's telling you like, dude, I had to go get help. I had to go to therapy. My therapist is a weird person, but I love, my therapist tried to get me into numerology.
Nice.
Like it's just that kind of stuff is, even though it's not going to be on any list. It's not on, IMDb top 250. You watch them and your experience might be different, but everyone has movies like that. Everyone has these random movies that barely anyone else has seen. For some reason, there was something that hit a chord and they had to... that's Dazed and Confused is like my lighthouse as far as creative stuff is concerned. Every time I'm in a rut, I just put that movie on and I automatically feel creatively charged again.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I don't see anyone getting that from like the Ant-Man and the Wasp. If it's fun, and there is a place for fun, like it's okay to see a movie for fun.
Sure.
But this is an art form.
Yes.
And it like I sound like such an asshole, but like, can we make it back about that? Let's try it for 5 years. Let's not make any comic book movies, and let's take all that money that all the comic book movies we're gonna have, and let's just give that to filmmakers and let them have $3 million. Get Out's budget was like $3 million or $4 million. You could make 100 Get Outs for the cost of the last Thor movie. That's crazy. The cultural footprint speaks for itself.
Absolutely.
Get Out is one of, if not the best movie to come out in the last 5 years. And even though I liked watching Thor, I chuckled. I have not thought about that movie once since I left the theater.
Well, and it's having an effect, man, because we talk about trying to find somebody to pass the torch to, right? Because so many people, it's so accessible to make movies. Everybody in every corner of every town with one of these, and everybody's making film in some way or another. But there's this huge gap in terms of the knowledge and, like you talk about, the art form, like what really goes into making a film versus, just, hey, okay, do something funny, right, kind of thing. And eventually, that generation's going to pass on, and unless somebody picks up the torch, we're really going to start losing big pieces, especially in America, United States. I'm sure other countries, I don't know for sure, but my sense is that there are other countries who are doing this better than we are. But
I would agree.
We're going to lose very important pieces of this, and we're going to end up with this kind of like WallE based society, right?
It's crazy you say WallE because I love the first act of WallE, and for a long time I hated it once he introduces the human characters. But that was 15 years ago, believe it or not. That was, 14. It came out in 2009, I want to say. Blows my mind. But now you watch WallE again, and even though the first act, it's the silent film. I have that on Criterion Collection. They just released it, and they have a whole breakdown of that scene when he takes her into his house. That's just, the mastery behind it. But that stuff with the humans doesn't seem that crazy anymore. Shows like Black Mirror in a span of 5 years went from like, that's mind-blowing to like, okay, and that's happening right now. So like, these things are desensitizing us to like, it sounds hyperbolic, but like, it's absolutely nuts to me. And like, since I'm already, going here, part of it is society in general has switched from an artist who makes a thing, celebrating, there's a little bit of love that gets spread to the artist, prolific artists make great things and we recognize them, but it's still about the films. If a good director makes a bad film, it's still a bad film. Now it's about celebrity, right? it frustrates me because you get on TikTok and all of the most viral TikTokers, they just put a camera in front of themselves and they're documenting their lives. And that's cool that there is a spot for that. I'm glad that people are entertained by that. But none of the like TikToks I like are like vloggers or like famous people who are just famous for, being a person who's, I don't know, has a lot of money, has resources to make these little videos.
Right.
So everything is about celebrity. No one, eventually we're going to lose, the art form.
Yep.
Because people would rather be famous themselves than create something.
Absolutely, man.
And, I feel like I can't relate to a lot. Even other artists that I know, there are some, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, to each their own. But there are some filmmakers that I've come across who, they like film, and that's why they got into it, but they seem so much more preoccupied with, by any means, I will become famous somehow. It's about them, and then the art is second.
Right.
And I know a lot of people like that, and I hate to say that I find it cringeworthy, but at the same time, it's so offensive to what myself and so many other people do.
Sure.
Yeah.
If I could choose between nobody ever knowing my name, but having a movie that has impacted millions, if I can make a movie, let's say, as good as Casablanca, that will live on for 100 years from now, but nobody knows I made it, that would matter more to me than if everybody loves me for just being myself, but I've never created anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone like Logan Paul comes to mind. Granted, he is becoming a really great professional wrestler. As a wrestling fan, I have to admire what he's doing. I'm a huge wrestling nerd, and he's putting in the work. But like prior to that, what did he do?
I would have sold him short too, but I'm with it. Yeah.
What did he do before becoming a wrestler? He just had a YouTube where he
somehow got big.
Did what? Like,
I don't know.
I would rather, make something and nobody knows who I am and have this thing live on. Because that's what the people before me did, and that's why I love this. But everyone is, I want to be famous, and I guess I have to make something in order to be famous, and I think it shows.
Oh, I agree.
I can't go and name any names, but I think their work speaks for itself. You can tell when someone is, if it's either going to be this or something else, they're going to, they're going to find a way to get their name out there.
Yeah. I'm seeing it too in the way I can say the anonymity to me, having the impact with anonymity to me that's the beautiful spot to be in.
Yeah.
Nobody knows who I am. You can walk through town or whatever, and everybody's, have you seen this project? You've seen this project?
Yeah.
Something that you created, and you're just walking right.
It would be nice, pat on the back once in a while. Sure. I wouldn't say that doesn't impact at all.
Sure.
It's nice when people recognize something you've done is good.
Yeah.
But I would trade that in. I would trade every pat on the back. Tonight people are going to come up to me. They're going to tell me they liked it. They're going to say great work, and hopefully a lot of them mean it. Yeah. But I would rather nobody come up to me, but everybody talk about the movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's just me, and I know there are a lot of others who feel the same way, and I'm glad that there are that many people who care that much about this art form.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who don't, and I think eventually they're going to win out, sad to say. I've been telling people this. It's a huge bummer that I'm going to be leaving soon, because this last 12 months has been the most gratifying year so far. I feel like I'm finally starting to get a little bit of recognition. For a long time, I was just kind of making stuff, and I had a small group of supporters, but it never really felt like I had made a huge impact.
Right.
And I'm starting to feel that now, when I'm on my way out the door. And it's like, man, where was this before? I would have loved I would have loved a little bit more people being aware of my stuff.
Yeah.
But you got to put in your 10,000 hours. So
like that.
I'm honestly not even close to that. I'm probably like quarter of the way there.
Wow. That's awesome though, man.
Well,
you don't lose ground. I mean,
Omaha will always be here.
Yeah.
Long term plans. So we have a board, and we have like investors and that kind of thing, and they want to bring aspects of the industry here.
Yeah.
And they have the resources to do that.
Yeah.
So we're thinking we're wanting to pioneer that.
someone needs to.
Yeah.
The Omaha thing is, it's not sustainable for creatives.
Yeah.
If you're a gig worker, if you're a director of photography, if you're a sound person, you'll find work, especially if you're good. It's mainly going to be commercial work.
Yes.
A lot of doc work.
Yeah.
If you want to do something that's creatively fulfilling, the budgets are lower. I've worked on a couple lower budget, I just worked on Damned If You Do.
Yeah.
Maher Jafari is producing it.
Okay.
He came back from LA. He's been back in Omaha for a couple years. Short film, $35,000 budget. They had to crowdfund all of that.
Wow.
Imagine if there were grants and
Yeah.
we could make 3, 4,
Yeah.
5, 6 movies
Yeah.
around that size
Yeah,
every year.
every year.
Think
Yeah.
about how many more people would know about Omaha.
Oh yeah.
If we didn't all have to crowdfund in order to make
Yeah.
our projects.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
in just on that vein too, jobs.
Yeah.
You know,
There'd be more jobs. You got these features that come in, a couple of them a year, but
Yep.
they're in that low SAG.
Yep.
Yeah.
400K,
Yep.
300K.
Yep.
Worked on one of those.
Yeah.
Everyone was underpaid.
Yeah.
Everyone. Our
Yeah.
sound person took half of what they would normally charge on a commercial. I got paid less than anyone because I came super late and there wasn't much of a budget left to give me.
Right.
I was the COVID compliance PA.
Okay.
So I was the one administering tests and bringing them to the labs every day.
Okay.
I was the locations assistant, so I had to be the first
Okay.
one there every morning, wipe down the trailers, make sure all the trashes were taken out, wipe all the surfaces down. I also had to leave last because my main person who was the boss of me, he was the first AD and the locations coordinator, and he's older,
All right.
and he was leaving every night kind of early.
Right.
So I was the first one there and the last one there. And on top of both of those things, I was the second AD, so I had to make the call sheets.
Wow, man.
This was a 10-day shoot.
damn.
I made the call sheets every day, every night before I left. First one there, last one there to do locations work, and I was in charge of making sure people were following COVID protocols.
Yeah.
I had to tell people to wear their masks. I had to,
Yeah.
do all these things. You will not believe this. Full days. $1,200. I made $120 a day for 12-hour days. And it was technically more than 12 because I had to stay late and lock up. So I was working 13 to 14 hours each day for less than $10 an hour. And that's a low budget SAG film. Granted, I was making less than everyone else, but our grips our grips were making $200 a day. I made $250 a day on this short film that I just helped out on as a PA.
Yeah.
So you can sacrifice your finances to work on stuff that you're passionate about.
Right.
Or, for someone like me, I have to leave because I want to write and direct my own stuff.
Right.
No one's coming to me with money for
Right.
that.
Right.
I can pitch stuff, but I don't want to wait 2-3 years for each project.
Right.
I want to constantly be working.
Mm-hmm.
So I can work on stuff and then I can dedicate a lot of my time. Let's say I really want a bunch of money for this.
Mm-hmm.
I can keep working on that, keep doing pitches, and in the meantime, I can make short films and I can stay.
Yeah.
And there's enough people in places like Austin and San Antonio and
Yeah.
even Omaha to a certain degree who
Yeah.
are willing to work for free or little
Right.
to just make art.
Right. Right.
So that's, for someone like me, Omaha is not sustainable right now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I would totally move, my family's here. I'm going to be back constantly. We're shooting a Nervous Records holiday special in the fall.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Because
cool.
it's kind of, I have a season 2 outlined. I'm going to start writing it soon.
All right.
We're hoping to get distributed on season 1,
Right.
and we want to use this holiday special. It it takes place year after the fact of the first season.
Okay.
And it kind of sets up the story for the second season.
Oh, nice. Cool. Yeah.
So, Chance and I have made an agreement that if we can get someone to give us 50,000 or more, 50,000 minimum, we would make a second season. So, if this gets distributed, I would love for it to be on something like Tubi because it's the ad revenue.
Yeah. Yeah.
I never paid barely. Our sound person got paid. We had to pay for a couple locations, but not really. We had to pay a bunch of gas money to people. No one really made a profit. I didn't pay any of my actors, but all my lead actors, they're also producers, and it sucks. But in order to justify having all these people work all this time, I had to give them points, in case we get picked up for distribution. They get so much of the ad revenue that we make off of it. And in order to afford everyone, I had to take myself out. I'm not going to make anything.
Wow.
Let's say this gets picked up and, even it's a moderate success, all the money we make is getting split between 9 other people, and I'm not making anything.
Wow.
But that's what it takes.
And that's, because even Craig, who runs Lights On, he said, I think Dana Altman did a feature recently here in town.
Yeah, going for 2.
Yeah,
Going
but
for 2, yeah.
he makes all of his money on political ads. That's where his money's being made.
Yeah.
Right. It's
That's all the people I know too. I know Great DP, who mainly does commercial stuff, ads.
yeah.
You know, he might do. He might help out on a crew on one of the. I think he worked on Going for Two,
Okay.
maybe DIT or something, or a second
Okay.
assistant camera, or whatever. But you have to pay, peanuts on those, and
Yeah.
then he goes and works on a commercial or a doc,
Yeah.
and that's how he makes 3 months worth of his bills and stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
You have people like Wade Rodman, sound guy. He had a movie play on the other night. He's very generous with his time, but he has to prioritize the gigs that pay the most.
Mm-hmm.
So he did sound on a couple of my early films, and what he would do is, and this is so generous. I'm lucky I was able to do this, but at the time, because he was being pulled into paid gigs versus stuff that might be a little more fun for him.
Mm-hmm.
He would, if he doesn't get booked on a gig,
Mhm.
he'll work for pretty much whatever you can afford, or at the time what
Wow.
I could afford. He's like, that's way lower than what I would ask,
Yeah.
but I don't have a
yeah.
gig currently on that day,
Yeah.
so I will commit to it, but up until 2 weeks before.
Mm-hmm.
If I get another gig offer up until 2 weeks before,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take it. I'm letting you know now so you can kind of have a backup plan.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening was he didn't want to leave me high and dry. He didn't get any gigs. But then it was like 3 or 4 days before we were going to shoot. He got a gig offer. But at that point, it would have been too late to find a new sound person. So he had to
Yeah.
turn that down
Oh,
because he told me he would give it up until 2 weeks. And then he would fully commit. That way I'm not last second looking for someone.
Right.
So I could be misremembering this, but I think a gig came up that he had to turn down because at that point he would have felt bad leaving me without
Yeah.
an option.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though they were going to pay 3-4 times what I paid him. So, that's not a kind of community where we're in a position where we can
No.
thrive right now.
Yeah, no.
I would
Yeah,
love
no.
to have it change. I would
Yeah.
love to come back and
Yeah.
granted, I would have to have a lot of success in the meantime, but I would love to be someone who comes back and is an ambassador for
Sure.
Omaha.
Yeah.
Someone like Dana Altman.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be fine, but in order to get there, in order to be in that position,
Yep.
I gotta leave.
Yeah,
Everyone
that's the
did. I
model.
mean,
Yeah, that's the
Alexander
model.
Payne,
Yep.
Dana Altman,
Yep.
everyone.
Yep.
None
Yep.
of them would be where they are.
No, not
if
at all.
they didn't leave.
Yeah, no. And that's what we're saying. I mean, the list of people who've come from Omaha, and you think about Omaha as the hotbed for fostering talent, is great. But you have to leave to go make it. And then, like you say, people are coming back to Omaha. But
I'm gonna miss it. That's for sure.
yeah.
Especially this last year.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's one thing you feel like you want to leave because there just aren't enough opportunities, and you're not necessarily feeling as connected in the community.
Right.
But it's been especially hard thinking about leaving now that I'm starting to feel
Sure. Oh,
tapped
yeah.
in a little bit more because I
Yeah.
feel a little bit more welcomed than I ever have. I
Yeah.
feel like I've made so many meaningful connections,
Yeah.
and I have to start over when I leave.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
be working from scratch. I have to make a whole new community, and it might set me back a couple years.
Sure.
Hopefully, I can take the momentum with me and get right going.
Yeah.
I've made enough stuff. I can show people like, hey, I've been doing
Yeah.
this for half a decade now.
Right.
I've self-funded almost all of my own work. I
Right.
can direct, I can write, I can produce. I've acted in my own things. I don't think my performances have been that great, but
But
I've
you've
done
done
it.
it, yeah.
I've done the thing.
Yeah.
I've been a PA. I've been a grip. I've been a COVID compliance officer. I can pretty much fill any role.
Mhm.
So if I need to start with gig work, then I'll start and I'll give people my info. I've always been one of those, favors.
Yeah.
I know that I'm going to need someone to come and be a PA for probably no money for me.
Yeah.
So anytime I have spare time, even though I direct my own films, I'm constantly doing, stuff for people.
Yeah. Makes sense.
If I have the time, then I need to be able to offer what I'm asking people to offer me.
Sure. Yeah.
That's just, I think, common courtesy.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.